They stopped the experiment on day 47 because the subject asked them to kill someone who didn't exist. Not himself, not the guards, someone else. Someone who was in the cell with him, even though the cell had been empty the entire time. But that's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is what the cameras showed. I'm holding the file now, folder 2847K. The edges are water-stained, or at least I hope it's water. There's a burn mark on the cover shaped like a handprint. Small hand. Child-sized, maybe. The file was sealed in 1979 and marked for destruction in 1991. But, well, here it is, in my hands. 26 pages of typescript, 3 pages of handwritten observations, and 14 photographs I wish I hadn't seen. The staples have rusted through the paper, leaving orange wounds that bleed through to the other side. Let me start with the setup. Chamber No.5, Leningrad facility. 19 March 1976. The KGB's Directorate S, illegals, deep cover, psychological operations, ran a program testing human limits, not endurance, not pain tolerance, cognitive limits. How far can you push a mind before it invents new rules for reality? Chamber No.5 was designed for absolute sensory isolation, but with a twist. Most isolation experiments remove stimulation. This one distorted it. The cell was 3 meters by 3 meters. Concrete walls, 20 centimeters thick. 1 drain in the floor. 1 observation panel, mirrored on the inside, 1 way on the outside. No windows, no clock, no furniture except a metal cot bolted to the floor. But here's the design element that made Chamber No.5 different. The walls were slightly non-parallel. Not enough to notice consciously, but enough that perspective didn't work correctly. If you looked at one corner, then looked at another, your brain couldn't reconcile the geometry. The angles were wrong by 3 degrees. Just 3 degrees off from true right angles. 3 degrees is nothing. It's barely perceptible, but your brain notices. Your visual cortex notices. And over days, weeks, it starts trying to fix the problem. It starts filling in what should be there instead of what is there. The lighting was constant but uneven. 17 watts from fixtures embedded in the ceiling at irregular intervals. They created shadows that moved as you moved, but not in sync. A half-second delay, barely noticeable. At first, the file says the chamber was originally designed for interrogation, but they never used it. Something about the first test subject, a GRU officer they were vetting for treason, who lasted 9 hours before he started screaming. The transcript of his breakdown is missing, but someone wrote in the margin, recommended permanent decommission of facility. They didn't decommission it, they refined it. By 1976, they were ready for a proper trial. Subject, Alexei Maximovich R., age 24. The subject's last name is redacted. The file calls him Subject R, or just Alexei. Before the experiment, he was a graduate student at Leningrad State University. Physics, specifically quantum mechanics. He'd written a paper, never published, about observer effects and consciousness. Someone at the KGB read it and thought, this one, he'll understand what's happening to him. That was part of the test. They wanted someone intelligent enough to analyze his own disintegration. Alexei volunteered. That's in the file, underlined twice. He volunteered. They offered him, I don't know what they offered him. The file doesn't say. But he signed the consent form. There's a photocopy. His signature is neat, confident. The handwriting of someone who thinks he knows what he's capable of. He entered Chamber No.5 on March the 3rd, 1976, at 14 Hoas hours. They sealed the door behind him. For the first 72 hours, the observations are routine. Alexei sits on the cot. He paces. He examines the walls, runs his hands over the concrete, tries to find seams or imperfections. He talks to himself. The microphones pick up muttering, mostly equations. He's trying to calculate the dimensions of the room. On day 4, he stops pacing. He sits very still in the center of the cot and stares at the corner where the walls meet the ceiling. For 6 hours, he doesn't move, doesn't blink, according to the observation log. Then he says, very clearly, "It's not empty." The operators monitoring him exchange looks. They check the camera feeds. The cell is empty. Just Alexei and the cot. He stands and walks to the far corner. He stops about a meter away and tilts his head like he's listening. Then he nods and returns to the cot. Dr. Pavel K., the lead psychologist, notes, subject is beginning to populate the environment. Expected baseline response to isolation. Will monitor for further development. Day 6. Alexei starts talking to the corner, not loudly, conversational tone. The transcripts are partial. The microphones weren't sensitive enough to catch everything, but fragments include, "I didn't think you'd be here. Yes, I understand, but the mathematics, they're watching us." He gestures while he talks. Pauses, like he's listening to responses. At one point, he laughs. It sounds genuine. Dr. Pavel notes, subject has created an auditory hallucination to compensate for isolation. Personality appears calm, coherent. Hallucination is serving as coping mechanism. Will allowed to develop. Day 9. Alexei stops sleeping in the cot. He sleeps on the floor, against the wall opposite the corner where he talks. When asked why, they used the intercom, the only time they broke protocol. He said, "He needs the cot more than I do." Dr. Pavel. Subject has externalized the hallucination. It now occupies physical space in his mental model, requesting permission to advance to Phase 2. Phase 2 meant adjusting the chamber. They could alter the temperature, the humidity, the air pressure. Small changes, the kind that make you uncomfortable without knowing why. They dropped the temperature 3 degrees over 6 hours. Alexei didn't seem to notice. But his friend, that's what he started calling it, my friend, apparently did. The transcript from day 11. Alexei. "You're cold. I can see you shivering." Pause. Alexei. "I don't have a blanket to give you. They didn't give me one either." Longer pause. Alexei. No, don't ask them. They won't listen. They don't even think you're real." He looks directly at the observation mirror. Alexei. "But you are real, aren't you?" The way he says it, the audio quality is poor, the tape degraded, but you can hear the question in his voice. He's asking himself as much as the entity he's created. Day 14. The observations get stranger. Alexei begins arranging his meals. They fed him through a slot in the door. Standard rations, bread and thin soup, tea in a metal cup. He'd eat half and place the rest on the floor near the corner. The food would sit there for hours, untouched obviously, and then he'd collect the empty dish and put it back in the slot. He told the guards, he ate it. He says thank you. The camera recordings show nothing. The food sits there. Alexei walks over, picks up the dish, returns it. But here's what made the observation team uncomfortable. The food was always gone, not eaten, not spoiled, just less. As if portions had been removed. The technicians thought maybe Alexei was hiding it somewhere, eating it later. They searched during his one bathroom break. Every 3 days, they'd move him to an adjacent room for 10 minutes. They found nothing. No hidden food, no waste. Nothing. Dr. Pavel. subject is likely consuming portions and experiencing dissociative amnesia, attributing the consumption to his hallucination. Recommended continued observation. But one of the junior researchers, his name is redacted, just Tech Li Tuat, V, wrote in the margin, checked massive food delivered versus waste removed. Discrepancy of 340 grams unaccounted for. Physical matter is going somewhere. Someone crossed this out in red ink. Day 23. Alexei stops talking to the coroner. He starts arguing with it. The transcripts show escalating tension. He's angry. He paces, gestures sharply, interrupts the empty air as if something is speaking. The fragments they captured. You're lying. The door is right there. I don't care what you think you know. You're not me. You're not. At one point, he picks up his metal cup and throws it at the corner. It hits the wall with a hollow clang and falls to the floor. He immediately apologizes, drops to his knees, holds his head in his hands, rocks back and forth. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, please don't be angry. Dr. Pavel. Subject's hallucination has become hostile or oppositional. This is the critical phase. Personality is fragmenting. Recommend intervention if subject becomes violent toward self. They didn't intervene. Day 29. Alexei stops eating. He still takes the food, but he doesn't consume it. He places it all in the corner, every meal, until there are stacked dishes forming a small pyramid. He sits on the cot and watches the corner for hours. When they tried to communicate through the intercom, asking him to eat, he said, "He's hungrier than I am. He needs it more." His voice was thin, weak. He'd lost visible weight. The cameras showed his uniform hanging loose on his frame. Dr. Pavel. Subject is exhibiting suicidal ideation by proxy. He is prioritizing the survival of his hallucination over his own survival. This indicates complete externalization of self-preservation instinct. Fascinating development. Request permission to continue. Permission was granted. Day 34. The operators noticed something on the recordings. When Alexei slept, he still slept occasionally, 2 or 3 hours at a time, his friend moved. Not in reality, but in Alexei's behavior. He'd be lying on the floor, eyes closed, breathing shallow, and then he'd flinch, jerk away from something. His head would turn to follow movement that wasn't there. His eyes would open, track across the room, then close again. Like he was dreaming with his eyes open, or like something in the room was moving while he slept, and some part of him could still sense it. One of the technicians, same one who noted the food discrepancy, wrote, "Subject's REM patterns on EEG are abnormal. 2 distinct wave signatures overlapping, as if 2 consciousnesses are active simultaneously." This note was also crossed out. Dr. Pavel wrote beside it, "Equipment malfunction, disregard." But the technician didn't disregard it. There's a second note, smaller, tucked into the file. Reviewed all EEG data. Pattern begins on day 16 and intensifies. Secondary signature is not subject's baseline. It is distinct, consistent, and increasingly active during subject's sleep periods. Requesting. The note ends there. It's torn, like someone ripped the rest away. Day 40. Alexei began moving differently. The observation team reported that his gait had changed. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, even though medical scans before the experiment showed no injuries. He held his left arm close to his body, protective, like it hurt. But here's the detail that made everyone uncomfortable. When the friend moved, when Alexei reacted to its presence, he moved smoothly. No limp, no injured arm. It was as if the pain belonged to Alexei, but the health belonged to something else. Dr. Pavel. Subject is transferring physical symptoms to his primary identity while attributing wellness to his secondary identity. Classic dissociative identity disorder, accelerated by isolation. The experiment is succeeding beyond projections. Day 43. They tried to end it, not because of Alexei's condition, because of the staff. 3 operators refused to continue monitoring Chamber No. 5. They reported nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and a persistent feeling of being watched. One of them, Major Dmitri S., submitted a formal complaint. The subject is not alone in that cell. I don't know what's with him, but it's aware of us. It looks at the cameras, not the subject. It looks. Major Dmitri was removed from the project and reassigned, but his replacement, Captain Irina L., reported the same thing after her first shift. There are moments when the camera catches, I don't know how to describe it, a flicker, a shadow that shouldn't be there, shaped wrong, moving opposite to the light source. It lasts less than a second, but I've seen it 4 times tonight, always near the subject, always just outside the frame. Dr. Pavel dismissed these reports as stress and observer bias. He ordered the experiment to continue. Day 47, the last day. Alexei woke from a brief sleep and immediately began screaming. Not words, just raw animal terror. He scrambled backward across the floor until his back hit the wall, then pulled his knees to his chest and covered his face with his hands. The operators tried to communicate via intercom. He didn't respond. He just kept screaming, his voice shredding, until he couldn't scream anymore and it became a high, thin, keening sound. Then he stopped, lowered his hands, looked directly at the observation mirror. His face was wrong. That's the word used in 3 separate reports. Wrong. His expression was calm, but the geometry of it was off. His eyes were too far apart. His mouth was asymmetrical, like someone had taken a photograph of Alexei and stretched it incorrectly. He stood, walked to the mirror, put his palm against the glass, and spoke in a voice that didn't sound like his. "Let me out. He doesn't need this body anymore." The operators froze. Dr. Pavel, watching from the control room, picked up the phone to call for security. But before he could dial, Alexei, or what was wearing Alexei, said, "He's still here. He's behind me. He wants you to kill him. Please. He's begging. Can't you hear him?" The cameras showed only Alexei standing at the mirror, but the audio picked up something else. A second voice, distant, muffled, like it was coming from underwater or from behind a thick door. It was saying the same words as Alexei, but out of sync. A half-second delay, an echo that came after the original sound. "Kill him, please, begging, hear him." Dr. Pavel gave the order. They flooded the chamber with sedative gas through the ventilation system. Alexei collapsed after 30 seconds. They waited 5 minutes, then sent in a medical team in hazmat suits, protocol for handling unconscious subjects. When they opened the door, the cell was empty. Not just empty of Alexei, empty of everything. The cot was gone. The drain in the floor was gone. The walls were smooth concrete, unbroken. No door, no observation panel. The team was standing in a sealed concrete box with no entrance and no exit. They panicked, called for backup. Engineers came with cutting tools and breached the wall from the outside. They found Chamber No. 5 exactly as it should be. Cot bolted to the floor, drain in place, observation mirror intact, and Alexei, unconscious, lying in the center of the room. But there were 2 sets of footprints in the thin layer of dust on the floor. 2 distinct tread patterns. One matched Alexei's boots. The other was smaller. Barefoot, human-shaped, but with 6 toes. They carried Alexei out. Medical examination showed extreme malnutrition, dehydration, and psychological trauma. But physically, he was intact. No injuries, no abnormalities except his left arm, the one he'd been protecting. When they examined it under X-ray, they found a fracture in the ulna. Old fracture, the radiologist said. Healed incorrectly, maybe 2 weeks old. But Alexei hadn't injured his arm during the experiment. The cameras showed no trauma. The fracture pattern matched the defensive wounds of someone trying to ward off an attack. Someone raising their arm to protect their face from being struck. From being struck by someone they couldn't see. Alexei never spoke again. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility in Moscow where he remained for 11 years. The file includes a single photograph from 1987. A man sitting in a white room, staring at the corner, lips moving silently. He died in 1991. The cause of death is listed as cardiac arrest, but the attending physician's note says, patient stopped breathing during the night, no distress observed. It was as if he simply decided to stop, or as if something decided for him. Chamber No. 5 was sealed permanently, welded shut. The entire corridor was filled with concrete. But here's what keeps me awake. I found a maintenance log from 1983, 4 years after the experiment ended. A routine structural inspection of Facility 19. The engineer reported hearing voices coming from the sealed chamber. 2 voices, one begging, one laughing. He broke protocol and drilled a small hole through the concrete to investigate. Nothing inside, just empty space. But when he put his ear to the hole, the voices stopped. Silence for 10 seconds. Then, very close, right against the opening, someone whispered, "He finally let me out. Now, I'm looking for him." The engineer sealed the hole and requested immediate reassignment. His request was approved. The file ends with a handwritten note from Dr. Pavel, dated 1994. After reviewing all evidence, I believe we succeeded. We didn't break Alexei's mind. We gave him a companion. Something that lived in the space between perception and reality. And when we opened the door, we let it out. If you're reading this and you hear 2 voices speaking in unison, run. It means he found you. It means you're next. I hear traffic outside my window. Normal sounds, the hum of the radiator, the clock on the wall. But sometimes, late at night when I'm reading these files, I hear something else. A second clock, ticking out of sync with the first. Half a second behind, just half a second. I haven't looked for it. I don't want to know if it's there. Because if it is, then I'm not alone. And if I'm not alone, then something that learned to exist in the cracks of one man's mind has learned to exist in mine. Chamber No. 5 is still sealed. Facility 19 was demolished in 1997. But the recordings remain. 26 pages, 14 photographs. And somewhere in Moscow, in an archive that officially doesn't exist, there's a metal canister labeled Chamber No. 5, Final Audio, Do Not Open. I requested it 3 months ago. It arrived yesterday. I haven't opened it yet. I don't think I will, because the label has a second note, written in different ink, added later. 2 voices recorded, only 1 voice entered. The file is closed. The experiment is over. But I still hear that second clock, ticking. Just half a second behind the first, and I'm afraid to turn around and see if there's actually a clock there at all.